Hello and welcome to tomorrow's Talk Today. I'm your host, Dr. Ryan Stouffer, today joined by special guests Shelby, Victoria, and Lane. On today's episode, we'll be discussing the relationship between police and protesters, particularly defunding the police brutality towards the Black Lives Matter movement, and protests occurring outside of America. Our guests today have watched and analyzed various forms of research discussing the relationship between protesters and police. To begin our discussion, let's take a quick look at what it means to defund the police.
New York City's proposal for the coming fiscal year cuts just 5% of the NYPD budget. But that same proposal calls for a 12% cut to the Department of Health. This is where the movement to defund the police comes in. It's a push to take the billions of dollars cities spend on police and move that funding to other services, like housing, jobs, or mental health care.
Defunding the police is different than abolishing the police. Shelby, why don't you give us your thoughts on defunding the police?
I think that it's extremely necessary, and I also think that we should be careful about the type of rhetoric we use. It's definitely not just completely abolishing the police. As we saw from the clip, we will be taking funds from the police and putting it into other places that will ultimately help them. So I think it's a really good idea.
Lane, what about your thoughts on the topic? What do you think about that messaging around defunding the police versus abolishing the police?
I think that's a good point. For example, just when I first heard defund the police, I was like, that's probably not a good idea because the police deal with a lot of trouble, and who would you call, if you were in trouble for an emergency? But like Shelby said, I think defunding the police really does mean allocating the funds elsewhere to maybe health workers or social workers or anything like that, so it can take some stress off the police to not have to deal with every single type of problem and just maybe stick to crime, for example. But I think she hit it right on the head about putting the funds elsewhere to take some stress off the police.
So Victoria, a slightly different question to you. What do you think if we actually see defunding the police, right? We see that reallocation of funding from police to other resources. How do you think that would change our society, change our country?
I just think that the public perception of police would just change because they're less of an overarching just system in society, and they have more of a concentrated job, and so many people have such a skewed vision of them, maybe for rightful reasons, but I just think that most people would positively perceive that change, and just because they'll be less likely to make more mistakes if they have less things to focus on. So I think it's going to be a positive thing, a positive change in society overall.
Okay, so we've seen since the George Floyd murder this summer here, right? There's jury selection for that trial. That defund the police has not polled well, right? Most Americans are not supportive of that. Do you think, as a communication student, do you think that's a messaging issue? Do you think it's just a weird phrasing and that's why people can't get behind it, or do you think it's the idea of reallocating those funds that cause people to turn against defunding the police?
Great question. I think that 100%, I think that people see that on the news or through social media and become very divided in their ideas. And as soon as someone says defund the police, and let's say that family that is seeing it doesn't exactly know what the right message is behind it, then of course people are going to think that it's not going to help society if we're completely getting rid of the police. But I think with more research and better media coverage on it, I think we should see a better message come across.
So Lane, kind of same question to you. Do you think that's a messaging issue or a content issue? Are people against the idea, or they're just against the way that's being messaged?
I think it's against the way it's being messaged because, like she said, right when someone just maybe an older male American that's all been around for a while, they probably don't think defunding the police is a good idea. So I think just the message behind it, if they didn't say, if they said defunding the police and type of fine print thing, it doesn't mean we're taking all the money and all the accessories and funds from them. It's just putting those funds in other places to help the police actually, so they have a lot less on their plate to be able to help people. So I think that answered that. So that's all I got.
I think part of it too is, we look at the idea of having other people respond to mental health calls, right? When somebody calls into 911 in a mental health crisis, I know Eugene, Oregon, I think Portland, Oregon as well, they've had it for a while where they have other mental health professionals respond to those calls, not the police, because a lot of times the police aren't trained to do that, right? They're trained to do something else here. So I think we've seen that be effective in other locations, and I think I tend to agree with you, it's a bit of a messaging issue. Victoria, question to you. On social media, what do you see the conversation around the idea of defunding the police? Are the social media commentators supportive of the idea? Are they kind of pushing back on it, or kind of what's your take on what you see on social media related to that?
I think that it's kind of half and half. Like, so many people don't truly understand the meaning of it, and even me, as someone who I feel I like to call myself an informed person, I still, when I first saw that hashtag, I thought that it meant completely defunding the whole police force and just getting rid of the police, and it took me taking an extra step to figure out what it actually meant, and a lot of people aren't really willing to do that. So so what I've seen is plenty of people knowing the meaning and plenty of people not really understanding what it means and completely against it. So
yeah, I think that's a really nuanced point, right? There's a lot to that, so it's hard to break down those complex things. Well, thank you all for bringing up some good points here about defunding the police. We have to take a quick break, but we'll be right back, so stay tuned.
You're listening to WMLU 91.3 FM, the music of Longwood University and Farmville, bringing a rebound to Phillips. Great, strong rebound by Cody Phillips. Jordan Centron with the mid-range jumper goes down off the backboard.
So the sports committee within WMLU is an award-winning committee in itself, and it's an opportunity for people to be able to call Division I athletic events. Basketball, we've done soccer, we've done softball for the first time last year. This year we're doing tennis for the first time, which I'm excited about, as well as baseball in the mix as well. So it's an opportunity for people to get on-air experience, learn who they are as a play-by-play, on-air talent. There's a lot of different things that kind of come with that.
All right, so with WMLU Sports, there's always 3 people working a game. So usually there'll either be 2 people calling the game, color and play-by-play, and then there'll be 1 person in the studio working the soundboard right here. The soundboard is to make sure that the guys or girls at that game are sounding good. They can hear them over the air or the web stream. If there's any problems, the person in the studio is able to adapt and adjust and make sure that everything here is working well.
I'm a proud Longwood graduate, class of 2011, and there is no way I would be here if it weren't for my time behind the mic at WMLU, the music of Longwood University and the award-winning home of your Longwood Lancers.
So this is an opportunity to grow, learn, figure out what works best for you, what skills you have, what makes you a good on-air talent, good play-by-play person. But it's also, of course, an opportunity to just meet new people with similar interests. Inherently, if you're joining the sports committee, you probably like sports. And then everybody else in the room does too. So it's an opportunity to grow, make new friends, and have that commonality between other individuals.
11:44 left in the second half, which brings us to our under 12-minute media timeout. So we'll come back with Harper Baker at the Charity Stripe here on WMLU Farmville 91.3 FM.
Welcome back. Thanks for sticking with us. Next, we're going to focus on police brutality towards the Black Lives Matter movement. The deaths of individuals such as George Floyd, Breonna Taylor have received national attention. Let's take a quick look at the history of police brutality on black deaths with a clip from Vox.
The death of an unarmed black man.
George Floyd!
It has been incredibly difficult to prosecute a police officer successfully.
I'm here because I'm sick and tired of seeing black men and women be killed and nothing be done about it.
As we can see from that clip, police brutality has impacted the Black Lives Matter movement. Lane, how do you feel about this?
So yeah, I think we can see from that clip that police brutality has gotten way out of hand. And the clip said, they're 3 times more likely to get killed, people of color, black people are. So a big thing I researched was body cams, because to me, I think that should be the evidence right there that you should have to, charge these police officers. But I did some further research on it, and from an article from PBS last year, it said only 5 states are required for their policemen to wear body cams like at all times, and I just think that's ridiculous because that should be the evidence right there that you have to charge these policemen, and more times than not, as the clip said, they're not getting charged, and I just think it's gotten way out of hand.
Victoria, from your research, what did you see about police brutality and kind of what did your thoughts you discovered about that subject?
We just see like really mind-blowing statistics that in 100% of these cases, only 1% are the police actually indicted for their crimes, and so they're just not being held accountable for these the killing of black people, black Americans, and I can't. It's hard for me to believe that every single time there was a good motive behind that, and so I can't understand why the justice system believes that is the case as well. So it's a troubling statistic in reality, and I just think that at the end of the day, we just need to make sure that we hold these police accountable, because every American is entitled to a trial and a way to see their case properly held out in court. And if they're killed before that happens, then that is just absolutely terrible. So yeah.
And I mean, yeah, our system is not doing people of color justice in this country because they're not getting justice when these situations happen. Shelby, question you, what do you think the role is of these citizens of police brutality being caught on tape? Do you think that's actually, we're seeing some change? Because now, we watched the horrific 8-minute, 46 seconds of George Floyd being knelt on. If that wasn't on tape, do you think change would be coming? Do you think that trial would be happening? What are your thoughts about this kind of citizen journalism role in all this?
I think it's making a big difference for sure. Awareness is definitely key, and something like this, showing that violence, even though it may be difficult to watch, putting that in the news and putting that on social media sparks, as we can see, protests and riots revolved around this, and I do think it's necessary, and I'm glad that social media has kind of enabled this to happen, because the change is going to come.
So, Lane, the next question to you, in your research on kind of body cams here, what are the police departments that are using body cams and forcing officers to have it on? Do we see less violence, or did you come across that at all?
See, I feel like that's an interesting question, because you think it would be less violence, because maybe they're like, okay, since we have these cameras on, we need to follow proper protocol to a T, because if something like that happens, obviously there's going to be repercussions on a policeman. So I really think that's an interesting point. But as Shelby said, I think this has sparked a lot of awareness. And but me personally, I just think if everyone wore body cams, that should be the evidence right there to indict or charge these police officers. So I think body cams is definitely an interesting topic.
Yeah, and you wouldn't hope it would come to that, but clearly, I think a system, and then of course a lot of individual actors in that system have lost their mission to protect and serve, right? That's their number one job here, and we don't see that happening enough. Victoria, what do you think about the media portrayal of police brutality towards the Black Lives Matter movement?
I just think it entirely depends on which media you're consuming. The media I watch as a day-to-day person sees it as the protests are perfectly justified for the actions that have been carried out by the police. But if you look at what my grandpa watches, it's the exact opposite. They're using buzzwords like riots and looters, and they're robbing stores and burning down places. They have no right to do this. It really just depends. And media is such a huge, it has such a huge role in how we perceive everything, including these protests. And honestly, it's up to us to be able to decipher what is the truth and what might be just a personal opinions reflecting on the truth. So.
And you make a great point. It's hard to determine what is the media these days, right? We throw around that term here, but that is something different to all of us here, as you mentioned your grandfather here. I saw a stat from earlier this summer here. I might be a little dated, about 95% of the Black Lives Matter protests were peaceful. Right, so we're talking about 5% which had looting, things like that here. So a vast majority of them had none of that, yet you look at the right-wing media, you'll see that happen a lot. So awesome. Well, thank you all for that conversation here. I think we could agree there's a lot more to consider here. Don't tune out just yet. We'll be right back to discuss protesters outside of America here on Tomorrow's Talk Today. The Communication Studies Department has always prided itself on having our students do original research. And in the fall of 2018, when I was teaching that class, I wanted to look for a way to have our students present that research in a different manner. And I did a little research, and I could not find anyone else who had live streamed original undergraduate research. So I kind of came up with the idea to have the students present it, and Dr. Paul was very agreeable here. And so rather than doing a traditional poster session or something like that, we came up with the idea to have our students present their research in front of the camera. And the cool thing about that is the distribution is much wider than it would be typically. Parents, alumni, friends of the department all got to watch that research, and the students also had something that was more lasting that they could look at later in life than a traditional poster format.
So one of the ultimate aims of doing research is that you get to share it with somebody, and that it's just not for yourselves or just to have some sort of document. It's to be able to disseminate that research, whether you have significant findings or not. And so being able to have an audience for your research project is paramount. And having an opportunity to live stream it gives students an awesome opportunity to be able to share it with a large audience.
So being in the studio, there's just nothing like that. It's the whole overall experience. You got the cameras, the lights, everything in front of you, being on the stage, and all the information's there, and you'll have one take to get that information out as efficiently as you can, compared to having a poster session where people come and go as they please, and you're just set at one spot for X amount of time. So being in the studio, it's just a great experience, nothing like it.
Thanks for sticking with us. To end our discussion today, let's talk about protests outside of America. Countries such as Nigeria have protested to call for change in their country. Let's take a look at a clip from the Center for Strategic and International Studies.
Nigeria is at an inflection point. On October 3rd, there was a viral video of a man being shot and killed by Sars, Special Anti-Robbery Squad, a unit of the police that is notorious for corruption, brutality, and extrajudicial killings. This led to, within a couple of days, massive protests on the street calling for Sars' disbandment. It was enhanced by and encouraged by the Nigerian diaspora. There were protests in London in solidarity with the Nigerians. And even here in the United States, the mayor of Houston held a vigil. Global international leaders used the hashtag #EndSARS or SARS must end to give the protesters an additional sign of support.
As we can see from that clip, protests can be impactful in creating change. Victoria, what are your thoughts on Nigeria's protest to end SARS?
Well, I just think that So the protests were made possible, I think, a lot because of social media. A lot of Nigerian youth were using their voice and basically spreading the message that SARS is a very corrupt organization, and obviously people in Nigeria knew that, but most people outside of Nigeria probably had no idea. So we saw something different with this protest compared to past ones, that it had more global attention, and I think that almost fueled their desire to actually get something to happen. And unfortunately, the government really didn't make much change. They took SARS, they rebranded it to SWAT. They made no type of changes to legislation, policy, or staffing. And so it really is unfortunate that the government doesn't feel like it's entitled to make change on behalf of its people and its safety. But then again, it's literally the government imposing corruption into Nigerian people's everyday life. So
yeah, it's sad to see that same systemic failure at play in Nigeria that we often see in our police system here in America. Shelby, what do you think the role of social media is in bringing attention to protests occurring in other parts of the world?
Yeah, like we were just talking about, citizen journalism has really sparked this global attention to corruption and police brutality. So similarly to what we see here, that really sparked a movement across the globe for them and spread awareness that I had no idea about it, honestly. So it really helps spread that to people who wouldn't be paying attention to it otherwise.
And I think once you get that awareness, I mean, most of us can agree, yes, of course we don't want police extrajudicially just killing people here. So awareness is part of the issues we struggle there. So Lane, similar question to you. Did you hear about the SARS movement in social media? Did you find anything else about it there?
Yeah, like Shelby said, I had no idea what it was until I saw it on Twitter. The trending topics have helped a lot with citizen journalism. If you get something just rolling, it'll pop up on Twitter at least. And yeah, like she said, I didn't know anything about it until Twitter. But SARS, Victoria alluded to, it's just corrupt, and it's sad to see because, they've ended multiple times and they come back as something else. So it's kind of just sad to see that the government won't take charge to change anything about it. But yeah, I didn't know anything about it until social media.
How about Victoria? A similar question to you. Did you personally find out about it from social media? Kind of what was where, kind of what platforms, things like that?
Yeah, so I personally saw it on TikTok. I saw a lot of people talking about it, and they would almost like use a sense of like clickbaiting. Like they started talking about like, oh, Charlie D'Amelio's new thing, and then they like cut to talking about Sars. And I think that was honestly a good way to get a lot of people who would have never seen it to actually watch it. And like me with literally like family there in Nigeria, I still didn't really know. Like, so it's honestly pretty amazing how much of an impact social media can really have on people's awareness of what's going on around them. So yeah.
A similar question to you, Shelby. What do you think the role of social media is in these police accountability protests, both SARS, Black Lives Matter here in the States? Where do you see social media helping you to tell that story?
Yeah, I think it's a lot of like this younger generation that we see. It's like a multiracial crowd, and everyone's kind of, it seems like at the forefront of everyone's issues right now is social issues. So I think that it puts these people in power in a position where they know that people are coming together across the globe even. So it kind of puts them in this like position where they know that they need to make a change, or people are going to keep protesting and they're going to keep talking. So
yeah, I think that's where we can really see the positive part of social media is the fact it can hopefully hold those in power accountable, right? The fact everybody has a voice and get that out there. I mean, we talked earlier about some of the situations in the U.S. Where if it wasn't for that cell phone video, if it wasn't for somebody being there and catching that, there would probably be no chance of justice. I mean, we still haven't seen justice for Breonna Taylor, but hopefully that'll be a federal trial here, and we could see some of that soon. But I think the power of social media, the power of the body cam, is key to hopefully holding people accounting and having a system that can bring justice for everybody. Well, I'd like to thank you all for joining me today. This has been quite a discussion, but that's all the time we have for today. For everyone behind the scenes here, I'm your host, Ryan Stouffer. We will see you next year when we come back with another edition of Tomorrow's Talk Today.